Hello, Trap Set listeners. As many of you know, I've spent the last year recording a psychedelic orchestral pop album. Well, now's your chance to hear the songs played live for the first time. The first show of my new band, Joe Wong and Night Creatures, will be on November 21st at the Masonic Lodge at Hollywood Forever. Accompanying me will be an incredible band, including many past guests of this show. On guitar, we have the great Mary Timony of X-Hex and Helium. On bass, Chad Molter from Farragut and Medications. On harp, the amazing Mary Lattimore, who, apart from releasing several solo improv records, has played with everyone from Thurston Moore to Kurt Weill. On keyboards, Chrysanta Baker of Low Moon. And since I'm singing, I had to call on a drummer to help me out. This drummer is, in my opinion, the greatest rock drummer of his generation. On drums, the inimitable Matt Cameron will also be joined by a 12-piece orchestra led by master arranger Paul Cartwright. And opening the show will be the ingenious stylings of past guest Craig Wedren of Shudder to Think fame. This is a rare opportunity to see a world-class band in an intimate setting and to support the podcast while you're at it. Visit my website, joewong.org, for ticket information. And do it soon because this will sell out. And now my conversation with the founding drummer of my favorite band on the planet, Hugh Grundy of the Zombies.
So I went to this guy and said, I'd like lessons. And he went, okay. So we sorted out the time and the place. And he said, it then came out that I'd been the drummer with the Zombies. And he said, are you serious? You want lessons? You've just played with the Zombies. I said, no, I want to know how I did what I did.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. I'd like to play something for you.
Do you remember summer days just after summer rain, when all the air was damp and warm in the green of country lanes, and the breeze would touch your hair, kiss your face and make you care about your...
You're hearing Beechwood Park by the Zombies, featuring my guest, Hugh Grundy, on drums. Hugh's playing, which combines catchy melodic hooks with a swinging groove, helped the Zombies establish themselves as one of the greatest and most influential rock bands of all time. The band's first incarnation, during which they recorded hit singles such as She's Not There, Tell Her No, and the classic Odessey and Oracle album, lasted only a few short years. But Hugh and the Zombies reunited a decade ago and continue to perform their timeless catalog on tour. The band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame earlier this year. I spoke to Hugh in Beverly Hills before a recent performance at the Greek Theater. And now my conversation with Hugh Grundy.
All roads in my mind take me back in my mind, and I can't forget you.
Well, the story was that when we first came to America, we played the Brooklyn Fox, and the Shangri-Las were on the bill, as were a load of other fantastic acts. And so we did about 2 or 3 songs, I think it was. So we're watching the acts for the first time that were influencing us across the pond, shall we say. And but the story about the Shangri-Las is particularly, of course, Leader of the Pack has a motorbike in it, which we all know. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out, you know. And so that was in the days before sampling. And so they had a real live motorbike. And the only person who could get it started was me. So it was my job when they were playing that song.
Oh, you mean live? They would use a real
live
motorbike
backstage behind the backdrop. And that's the only way they could get the authentic sound of the motorbike. So at the right point in the song, I used to kickstart this pesky thing and rev it at the right moment. Watch out, watch out. Well, I can't remember how the song goes now particularly, but there's a point in it where the car, it goes vroom, vroom.
Before he meets his demise.
Yes, exactly. And that was my job to do that. And Rod or Colin got to kiss her rather than me. Never mind.
Did you make an effort to?
I think I was charming, let's put it that way. But,
you seem pretty charming off the bat.
Thank you.
Did you grow up in St. Albans?
I went to school in St Albans. I actually grew up in Hatfield, which is the same little town that Colin grew up. And but I went to school in St Albans, and of course that's where I met Rod and Paul. And so the story goes that Rod, at the time, the school had what they call a school cadet corps. And you had to, every Friday, you had to come to school in like your cadet uniform. And in the afternoon, you went like on parade, or you went up in the woods with guns, and they give you a couple of blanks to fire, and that's so it's playing soldiers really, or learning about it if you like. And that I didn't appeal to me a terrific amount, but I had spotted that the band, the school band, cadet band, all they ever seemed to do was go down the band hut and clean and polish their instruments. And I thought, that seems more like a job for me. So I applied to join the band, and I got in. But they gave me the bugle first. So I started playing the bugle, which annoyed the neighbours hugely. So I paraded once or twice with them with the bugle, but they were at the back and the drums were at the front. And I thought, those drummers are getting more looks than what I am. So I thought maybe I should apply to join the drum section of it. And I did, and I started learning the drums, and I found I had a natural talent for it. So when they gave me lessons to play, it came very easy.
But it was all kind of driven by your desire for looks initially.
Exactly. Pure vanity.
Huh.
And I've said that many times before in interviews, I've got to tell you.
So it's interesting that your propensity for vanity took you to your life's calling.
Yes, how funny is that? Who would have ever... You could not have written the book. So, of course, there I was, and we used to rehearse, and we used to parade in the school parade ground and one thing another. And to my eternal happiness, Rod saw that I had he saw that I had perhaps a little more rhythm than the other drummers. And he said to me one day, "Do you want to join a rock band?" And I just went, yeah.
Which rock bands were you listening to at the time?
Well, golly, it was the beginning of rock and roll, if you like.
So had you been listening to skiffle and things like that?
I think I tell you what I was more listening to was jazz. I would go to various clubs. The Red Lion in Hatfield used to have a regular jazz night, and we'd go down there, and of course I found myself watching the drums like all night long, shall we say, and thinking, that's great, I like that. And then Rod picked me because he thought I had a bit of sense of rhythm. Do you want to join a rock band? Yes. And there we were, and there we started, and that little yes changed my life forever.
What was your trajectory before that yes?
I'll tell you what my trajectory was. I was in the bank, having left school, but we had started the band by then.
So you left school at 16?
Yes, I didn't go to university, although the rest of them were clever clogs, as you may find out. I think I became more streetwise by virtue of joining the band and starting to go around the world. I didn't have that many qualifications, but I joined the bank, and my parents were very pleased about that. And then, of course, one day I said to them, by then the Zombies were playing. The Zombies were the Zombies, and we were playing local clubs and making a mark for ourselves locally. And one day I said to my mum and dad, we want to turn professional and go out on the road. So I want to leave the bank and join this band. They were, bless their hearts, they were shocked, and we discussed it at great length. And then, excuse me, they gave me their full support. They said, son, if that's what you want to do, then we support you. And indeed, 4 out of the 5 parents did all the same. Paul's parents were a little less keen on the idea, but in the end they came round because Paul insisted, and credit for that.
What did your father do when you were growing up?
My father was an aircraft engineer, and he worked all his life in a company called de Havilland's. And when he first started there, he was making the Tiger Moth. Then he was making the Mosquito, famous aircraft in World War II. And he went on to be involved in making the Comet for all its problems. And, of course, Boeing then took over, but that's another story. And yeah, so he taught me a lot about mechanical things, which funnily enough has played a big part in my life as a drummer, because I'm very keen on sort of mechanical things, so I know how tight nuts and bolts should be, and I've made my own double bass drum pedal, for example, out of 2 Yamaha double pedals, and I've combined them together, and I now have a Yamaha double pedal in the middle. The beater is in the middle, so you sit absolutely symmetrically to the whole kit, which was my idea at the first place. I did punt it to Yamaha, but they said, if we think of it, we'll do it. But to this moment, they haven't done it. But
we should get them back out.
Well, I've
Thursday.
taken. Yeah, I haven't got the double pedal with me this time because, for reasons of authenticity, with playing Odessey and Oracle.
I would love to hear Odessey and Oracle with the double kick.
Wouldn't that be funny? Wouldn't that be funny? Yeah. I mean, as it is, I know Rod quite rightly introduces Odessey and Oracle as we will play the whole album in its entirety, note for note. For that purpose, we need another keyboard player. We need Chris's wife Viv to sing high harmonies, and so it goes on. And we need Steve to do an extra tom beat on Time of the Season. But I have to say, I find myself putting a little bit extra here and there because I can. So it is note for note perfect, but there's a few extra bits as well. Maybe a flam here or a crash there that wasn't actually on the album.
I'll be watching for any.
You're going to watch me closely now, aren't you? Okay, fine. Now that puts me on my metal. And you know what? It doesn't bother me, funnily enough, knowing that
it should change. I mean, the music is.
Well, it should. It should advance a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why I only use a single pedal. It's transportation of it as well, because I have to bring it here, and my own snare I play. But I mean, if you listen to Odessey and Oracle, there's no sign of any double pedal, of course.
No.
But you're quite right. It'd be quite fun to one time surprise Rod.
Maybe on his birthday one year.
Yeah, and he'll suddenly
give
go,
him a little present.
Where did that come from?
All right, so back to your trajectory. It sounds like you came from a relatively happy middle class home. Did you feel like there was something else out there for you as a child, or were you content until that small yes changed the course of your life?
No, I don't think I was content. Funnily enough, I was talking to Chris about that the other day, and thinking at the time I'm going into the bank with the prospect looming of maybe a career in the bank and then ending up like a bank manager or something like that. And I thought, there's got to be a bit more fun in life than that. Little did I realise how big it would grow and how it would take over my whole life, to the point now where I'm having the absolute time of my life doing it. Again, this, what I'm saying is this time.
The second iteration.
The second, yeah, exactly. But, your question again, sorry.
I was just kind of trying to get a sense for, were you searching for something else?
I don't think I was, although looking back on it, I think some little seed was planted in my head when, for one Christmas present, I was probably 7, 8, 9, something like that. My dad, who, as I told you, was an aircraft engineer, had made a drum, a little snare drum type thing. He'd made it at work because he had access to all sorts of metals. And I still have a piece of the metal he brought home for my first Ludwig kit, but I'll maybe tell you about that in a mo. And so he brought this little drum home, and I was absolutely entranced with it. Absolutely entranced. And I would just play it from morning to night. And so maybe that planted a little seed that I didn't realise until I decided to join the drums in the cadets. So you see, maybe it was there all the time.
Can you remember how it felt in your body when you played that first drum?
I think I thoroughly enjoyed it. More than just enjoying it, I realised that it was probably upsetting the neighbours, and probably my mum and dad would be going, I don't think we should have got him that for the Christmas present.
Right.
But yeah, I loved it. The more that it was made by my dad at work,
When did you start feeling like being a drummer was central to your identity?
Good question, and I would think that as the Zombies grew, starting off as we did, rehearsing and finding that there was a lovely cohesion between 5 people all thinking along the same sort of lines, with a desire for what we wanted to do and the type of music we wanted to play, influenced by all the acts from America. And when we started getting noticed, recognised in the locality, I began to realise I'm really enjoying this. I really, really enjoying it. And so I started listening to, well, the radio a lot, particularly then. There wasn't much on television, but I listened to as much as I could on the radio. And of course, my ear was tuned to the drums all the time. And so I would listen to all sorts of records and pick up what the drummer was playing and thinking, I like that bit he's doing there, because I'd remember it from whenever. And then I'd listen to all sorts of other records, picking out bits and pulling them into myself and using them. And so that, I think, probably developed my style. And it was then that I realised I'm actually really enjoying this. Let's hope it goes on. And as you know, we won a competition in Watford. It was called the Hearts Beat competition, which is a little bit of a play on words because it was Hertfordshire, but they spelt it Hearts. And we were lucky enough to win that competition, which gave us a recording contract with Decca. And of course, by then it's really beginning to grow and grow and grow. And I thought, this is absolutely fantastic. By then we were professional, and by then we were lucky enough to, I say lucky, I hesitate to use that word because we worked hard at what we did. We rehearsed hard, and we were rehearsing the songs, the wonderful songs that Rod and Chris both wrote.
It's sometimes difficult to determine where luck begins and talent ends.
Very
because,
true.
I mean, Rod was lucky enough to be that talented, or Chris was
Yes.
lucky enough to be that talented.
Exactly, you can say that.
And you were lucky
And I
enough
was
to
lucky
find
enough
each other.
to have found each other, and lucky enough that I realised I had a bit of a talent. Our very first rehearsal, and I'll tell you about that, and there's a plaque on a wall in a pub in St Albans to honour that effect. And we went down to the local club, the Pioneer Club, and we started. By this time, we wanted to play on some proper equipment, and we borrowed Rod's cousin's, the late dear departed Jim Rodford, the name you'll know, and he offered his gear so we could try it out.
He was in Argent, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
he was in Argent. Then he went into the Kinks and was with the Kinks for, I don't know, many years, 15, something like that, played on many of their albums. And then, of course, he joined the Zombies touring. And so that's Jim, a most wonderful character. And he came and played when we ran a pub. My wife and I ran a pub for 5 or 6 years. And he used to love coming up to play with us in the pub with various musicians. And so once again, I've diverted off the
That's okay. It's all about the tangent.
There you go. It's the tangent.
Earlier you said that eventually the band completely took over your life. When did that start to happen?
I think when we turned professional. Mm-hmm. It was then that was then my life. And we were going up and down the country, England, playing bigger and bigger venues, and we started doing a lot of universities became popular for us, where we were popular, and so that was huge fun for what I was then 18 or so.
What were your ambitions?
My ambitions then, well, I think my ambition was for the Zombies to get bigger and bigger, and let's have a hit record, let's start moving out of England and touring elsewhere. And that came, once again, fortuitously, because the record we made as a result of winning that competition was She's Not There. And that got released in America, and it went to number 1.
Well, no one told me about her, the way she lied. Well, no one told me about her, how many people cried. But it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? Please don't bother trying to find her. She's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way she looked, the way she acted, the color of her hair. Her voice was soft and cool, her eyes were clear and bright, but she's not there.
So immediately let's get the guys over. So that's the first time we ever came to America. And we played the Brooklyn Fox, which is no longer there, I believe. And if you listen to one of Rod's songs on their latest album, Still Got That Hunger, you'll hear it. It's called New York. And it absolutely encapsulates how we felt about coming to America and playing with some of those wonderful people.
What was your creative role in the band?
As the drummer, I think that was to try and find something a little bit different than what other people were playing. So, as I said, I'd been listening to all sorts of people and taking bits from every one of them. So that gave me a sense that listening to the songs as they were first played, Rod would maybe play them on the piano in his front room. And I would get an idea and say, look, Rod, what do you think if we did such and such? And he'd go, that sounds like quite a good idea. And he would suggest things as well, because he has a musical mind. He really, really does. Not just the keyboard, but he can hear, like what the bass should play, and perhaps what the drums should play. So he would be suggesting things as well. And then we'd go into, I say rehearsal studios. We used to go around the village hall in a nearby village, and it was at that point we would rehearse songs to play them A, live, and B, with a view to recording them. So we would rehearse them to the end, so that we were played together, and we knew that when we went in the studio we could record that song straight away without messing about, without spending studio money and so on and so forth, and we would play it all together live.
Are you a very self-critical person when you're listening back to takes?
Fairly self-critical. I would often think to myself, I wish we could do one more take, because I could just do that there or something like that. But then sometimes the producer at the time would say, that's it, that's the one, that's the take, we love that. But as time went on, we began to realise that the producer at the time wouldn't be quite getting what we had in mind for the type of records that we were making. So that leads me to Odessey and Oracle, which is of course born out of that desire to produce ourselves, or I would rather say by Rod and Chris. So at the point where we weren't doing any more type of recording, we went to CBS, I think it was.
Yeah.
And they gave us some money, very little money, and they gave us a chance to go and record at Abbey Road. And we were the first act or group to go into Abbey Road that were not EMI signed to the EMI records. And we went in just after the Beatles. There were quite a few instruments left lying around that they hadn't taken away, in particular John Lennon's Mellotron.
And this was just after the Beatles recorded Sgt. Pepper's.
Absolutely.
And I think what Rod actually told me is that he contributed some of his personal money so that you could record because the budget was so small.
Absolutely. They did.
And as far as the Mellotron is concerned, what I had always heard is that it was used because there wasn't a budget for string players or flautists or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. And the minute Rob tried it and played it, and it was John Lennon's, and he'd left it behind. And as he will say, he said, I never actually asked him, but I said, when he tried it, he loved the sounds that it was making. And that was an original Mellotron, don't forget. Mm-hmm. It was the one where tapes. all the notes were played on tapes, mm-hmm. and it was quite a tricky old thing. Tapes would sometimes fail and so on. And he found he loved the sound of it, and that's why it is on several tracks on Odessey and Oracle.
How did you come up with your drum parts for Odessey and Oracle? It seems like you really evolved by that point as a drummer.
Absolutely. Well, that came about, of course, from several years by then, 2 or 3 years of playing live up and down the country, and indeed having gone to America and come back and so on, and watched and listened to all the live acts that were on that stage then, and watching them play and thinking, I like that, as I said, take a bit from everybody. But one story I'll tell you was one night, one of the drummers, the drummer from the house band, and I think there were 2 drummers in that house band, and one of the drummers came up to me and said, may I do an American accent? He said, man, I absolutely love your bass drum pedal work. And I looked at him and went, but I got it all from you. So that's how it evolved.
Today, Odessey and Oracle is regarded as a classic album, but at the time that it was released, you basically broke up the band before it had any success. And, I think it was about a year or 9 months after the band dissolved, Time of the Season became a big hit in the States, but by then you'd all moved on.
We had, you're quite right. It only became a hit. I think at first the record company wanted to put out some other track on there. And I think it might have been
Butcher's
Tale. Yes, quite so. We all went, really? Okay, well, if that's what they're thinking. And of course, nothing, But then one DJ in a little town called Boise, Idaho, started playing Time of the Season. And I think then other radio stations would be listening to each radio station and see what they were playing. And somebody else started playing it, and then somebody else. And it grew a bit like a little fire. And it just grew and grew and grew until people started buying it. And then before you knew it, it went to number one. Sadly, we'd already split up by then. Although there was quite an inducement to reform and get back and do it. But the guys had moved on. And Rod had formed Argent and was in full flow with that, involved with Chris, of course. Colin, I'm not sure what he was doing at that particular moment, but I don't think he was in the I don't think he was in the music business. I mean, he soon came back, of course, with his own albums, own wonderful albums.
I think he told me he was working in insurance for a while.
Yes, he was.
But so what was your next step after you made this great album, which failed to succeed immediately?
Right. I having split up. So we've split up, and I'm thinking, well, I've got to go and get a job. Most of the reason we split up was because there wasn't money coming in, and we were all a bit short. So I thought, well, I've got to go and get a job. So I did a few different things. It was a little while before I thought myself, I should maybe get into the music business somehow. And I applied to CBS to join them to get a job. And I did. They took me on as what they call a plugger, which means you go round to the radio stations with the new records and you make an appointment with producers for various radio shows and try and get them to play the records. Say, you've got to listen to this one. And that was the job.
Were you good at it?
I think I was. Yes, I think I was.
What was your style?
I can't remember. But what I was going to move on to was the fact that, fortunately, I could see how the record company worked. And I thought, A&R looks really, really good because it's looking for new artists and listening to new records and so on and so forth. So I applied to join A&R and was taken on in the A&R department. And one of my main claims to fame in the A&R department was my job was to listen to tapes that were coming in the post, in their hundreds. So my job was to listen to those tapes and see if there was anything there that could be of any interest. So generally speaking, after the first 20 seconds, 30 seconds or so, you'd go, I don't think there's anything there. Thank you very much, Secretary, send that back, thank you, but we'll pass this moment. One tape took my interest, and I played it, and I played the whole thing, and I thought, wow, this sounds really, really good. So I got in touch with them and said, where are you playing? And they said, whoever it was, I phoned, said, well, we're playing at I think it was the Royal Hospital in South London somewhere. I said, right, I'm coming along to see you.
Were you living in London at the time?
No, I was living in Hatfield then, still living at home. But I was always going up to London and, all sorts of stuff. And so I went to this hospital gig that this group was playing, and they just absolutely blew me away. And I thought, these guys are going to be huge. So I went back to CBS, and I spoke to my A&R manager, who at the time was Dan Loggins, brother of Kenny Loggins, who, bless his heart, came to see us last night. And I said, Dan, you've got to listen to this. These are going to be great. And he said, oh my God. He said, yes, you're right. He said, I love that. So he then approached management and said, I think we've got something really good here. And they listened to it. And by then, the money for that particular group, and I'll tell you who it is in a sec, went higher and higher and higher.
This better be good.
Oh, it is. Oh, it is. Eventually, they said, too much money, we have to pass. I said, you're passing on Queen?
Oh, no.
And they said, sorry, yes. I said, they're going to be huge. rest is history.
Were they Queen at the time?
Yes,
or
they
Smile?
were. Yes, they were.
They were Queen.
No, they were Queen. No, that when I went to see them at that hospital gig, they were Queen then. So there you are. That's my little claim. They should have signed.
Did you sign anybody that did become huge?
Not me personally, although I was involved in various people. But my other job was to listen to records that American records that would be sent over for a possible release in England. So that was one of my little jobs. I had one or two successes. If you remember Witch Queen of New Orleans by Redbone, I sort of picked that out the pile and thought, that's good, that should be released here. And it was a hit. And there were a couple of others, I'm sure, I can't quite remember now.
After the band broke up, did you feel like you had lost part of your identity?
I did. You're quite right.
Lost the magic?
I did lose a bit of sense of where am I going, and I'd actually stopped playing then.
And you were only how old at that time?
When the Zombs finished, I would have been about 22, 23.
So the whole kind of first go-round, you were a teenager when it started.
Absolutely.
You were still living at home.
I
You'd
was.
had hit records, a number
Absolutely.
one record in the United
Absolutely.
States, and then a few years later, you're just back at home,
Yes.
wondering what to do next.
Wondering what to do next.
Yeah.
Then I thought, well, as I said, it came to me as an idea. Maybe I should get into the music biz somehow.
And so how long were you at CBS?
About 4 or 5 years, and then a gentleman called Mr. Clive Davis took over and decided to trim back on the... I'll put it nicely as I can. He decided to trim back on the staff, and I was redundant. And that threw me back a bit as well. But from that point on, I sort of did all sorts of different jobs, none of which were really very interesting, but it was work and I was enjoying it. And at a point in time, and I can't remember what year or so it was, and I thought, I'm still loving drums. Why aren't I playing drums? And at that point, I was first married for about 5-6 years or so, and that sadly came to an end. And at that point, so I was really floundering then.
Did you have children to support?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I've got 4 children all told in my life, all of them beautiful. And I was then playing a little, what you might call a pub band. We call it a pub band, pub clubs. And the organist at that particular point decided to leave. And so we needed a new keyboard player. So we were playing in a big pub in the East End of London somewhere. And so the boss of the pub, the governor, knew of this, a brother and a sister, and he knew that the sister was a keyboard player. So he got in touch with the brother and said, brother, you've got to go and get Tracy to, and that's my wife now. So Gary, her brother, went home and said, you're going to join this band, you're going to join this little local band. So she did come along and she did try out, and she played the first gig or so with us, and she was pretty terrible. And I said that to the bass player, John, who I'd been playing with for a long time. And I said, she's not very good. I think we need to get rid of her. And he said, well, give her a bit of a chance because, it's a nice image for the band. She's a good-looking girl. And I went, okay. And so she remained in the band, and very, very slowly, love developed. And we've been married ever since, 36 years. What day? Last week, wasn't it? Monday, Tuesday, I think it was. Yeah. Tuesday. Indeed, it was Tuesday. 36 years married.
I close my eyes and soon I'm feeling sleepy. I sleep so easy, there's nothing on my mind, and life seems kinda, I want her, she wants me. I walk downtown and as I look around me, all around me, the people smile at me.
Hey you, remember that show I shamelessly promoted at the top of today's episode? Well, have you bought your tickets yet? Seriously, When's the next time you'll be able to see Mary Timony, Mary Lattimore, Chad Molter, and Matt Cameron on stage together with an orchestra in a historic, intimate venue? Don't miss out. Go to joewong.org for tickets.
Is that your primary creative outlet for the 80s and 90s?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. We were playing, and we started playing sort of bigger pubs and more clubs type thing, and that was that's just what I love doing. But in that slight between time when Tracy and I were first getting together, she said to me, we used to go out visiting pubs and watching music, which is what drew us together, of course, not only playing it, but going to watch it as well. And she said, we're going down this pub tonight called the Royal Standard, which is a pub in the East End of London there. There was a band playing. And, of course, I was watching the drummer and blown away. I thought, fantastic. Once again, he was doing something that I'd never seen before, and I now do to this day. I play what they call open-handed. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever watched Simon Phillips, a guy called Simon Phillips...
That's what I was going to guess. Yeah, sure.
Simon Phillips plays open-handed. I don't do quite everything he does, but that's how I play now. And so I went to this guy and said, I'd like lessons. And he went, okay. So we sorted out the time and the place. And he said, it then came out that I'd been the drummer with the Zombies. And he said, are you serious? You want lessons? You've just played with the Zombies. I said, no, I want to know how I did what I did. So I want you to teach me how I did it. And he went, okay. And so I went there. And what it did, it took my mind away from the divorce, basically. And so I used to go there every week, and he'd give me lessons, and I'd go home and, learned to read the lessons and practiced and went back and that. And I like to think that that's helped me a huge amount, because I now know what a triplet is. I now know what a paradiddle is.
Right. So when you were playing the beat for, say, Beechwood Park, which has a triplet in it, you didn't know what it was that you were doing. No,
because Rod at one time did say to me, he said, why don't you play that triplet there? And I went, well, I said to myself, I actually don't know what a triplet is. And he went, no, you go like that, dee-dee-dee-dee. And I went, oh, right, oh, yeah, I know how to do it, just didn't know what it was.
Yes. How long were you studying drums?
I would say I went to him for about a year or so, good year, and I found it very, very useful, very useful. Terrific drummer.
And it sounded very therapeutic as well.
Well, it was, and that was the other reason I went, to take my mind off the troubles at that time,
Are your children musical people?
Sadly, no. The only one with any vague amount of musical talent is Helen, my first daughter with Tracy. She has got a good singing voice, and as she was growing up, she would be singing all the songs that were on the radio, for instance, in the car. But more than that, I'm listening to her, and she was singing the harmony. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, Helen, you seem to be singing the harmony, not the lead notes. And she said, yeah, no, I like doing that. And she always said, well, I love singing, but I couldn't go on stage or sing in public. I said, oh, I think you could. So I persuaded her, and the band I was playing with at the time, I said, come down to rehearsal, see how you get on. And she did, and she rehearsed one song, and whenever I hear that song come on the radio, it always reminds me of it. But anyway, we rehearsed this song, and I said, right. And by then we were in the pub. We were running the pub, and we used to have music all the time. As I said, Jim came down, John Verity used to come down, a guy called Bobby Graham, one of the best drummers ever in the world, who's played on pretty well most of the British hits that were ever in the 60s, 70s. And we had some great nights there. And anyway, I tempted her to come up and sing this song, and she did come up and sing it, and sang it really well. She's never done it since, funnily enough, but I always say to her, so now you can't tell me you've never done it, because you have. So you could actually do it again, but she never has.
Maybe that was a smart choice.
Yeah, it could be. You never know.
As somebody who's been in the music business for a long time, sometimes I wish I would have done something else. Maybe worked at a bank.
I know where you're absolutely coming from. Love the music biz, but I know, me too. It's got its funny moments, hasn't it?
You've been playing gigs with the Zombies again for about 10 years?
It must be about that.
How did that come about? Were you surprised to hear from the guys again?
No, I was always in touch with Chris. We used to correspond, talk on the phone now and again, and so on and so forth. I would say Chris is my best friend in the world, and I think he might think the same of me. I like to think. So there was always a thing with us. Him being a bass player, me being a drummer. If you get those right in the band, then the band's great. So at one point, I can't really know why it came about, but it was Chris. I think Chris suggested it to Rod one time, because by then the touring band were going out and beginning to make headway in America and working their socks off, staying in the cheaper sort of hotel, shall we say, with the less comfortable transport and so on. And Chris said to Rod one day, they were in contact, they used to chat. He said, wouldn't it be a great idea if we could play Odessey and Oracle in its entirety? And Rod said, I don't see how we could do that because of the overdubs here and the extra voices there and the mellotron here and so on. But nevertheless, he said, sounds like a good idea. So what we did is we all got together. We went round Rod's house and we all got round a piano and they started playing the songs with just Rod on piano and the guys singing. And it was like we'd never been away. And we all said, this is too good to just pass up like that. So we must try and do something about this. And so it gradually evolved, more rehearsals round, and then Jim became involved because he was with the touring band. And so we used to go round his house in his front room. By then we were using instruments and playing it in his front room. And once again, a bit like the 60s, we realised we had something. And so then we started thinking how we could play it note for note, which is how Rod introduces Odessey and Oracle on stage now. We're going to play this in its entirety, note for note. As I said earlier.
No extra flams.
No extra flams, no extra singable tings and things like that, which I do now. And
but if I bring you a double kick to the gig on Thursday, will you use it?
Probably not. Probably not, because it won't be my in the middle pedal. But good idea. A good idea. No, don't please. And so it gradually evolved, and we as it were tried it out 3 nights at the Shepherd's Bush in London there, and the place was full every night because of its absolute. People beginning to realise Odessey and Oracle was a bit of a special album. And so it just grew and grew and grew. We played the Shepherd's Bush and it just went down an absolute storm. We said, we've got to do this again. And we played Hammersmith Apollo. We did it there. We had a little mini tour around England. We played it around England. And then we thought this maybe should go to America. And so we did. We came on tour. We started playing Odessey and Oracle around America. The first set would be the touring band playing some new songs that they'd written and some of the old songs the Zombies had done. And then we would play Odessey and Oracle in its entirety for the second half. And it just grew and grew and grew. And then we came back for another tour and another tour. And here we are doing it on another tour, to my amazement.
How does it feel when you're on stage playing with these guys?
Fantastic. I can't think of a better word to say fantastic. I look at Rod, he's generally in front of me. I look at the other guys and think, now I really do mean how lucky.
Well, this was over 50 years ago that you started the band.
I know.
Is that something that was even conceivable when you were a teenager, that, okay, we'll all be in our 70s playing music together?
Never in a million years. If somebody had written that down in a book, I'd have gone, never.
And if you could go back and give a message to Hugh in 1980 when you were going through your divorce and the most difficult period of your life,
sure.
What advice would you give him?
I would have said, hang in there, things are going to get better. Because you wait long enough, then the good stuff does come around. I'm a little bit spiritual, and of course, I'm always speaking to whoever you speak to and say, come on, I need a bit of a break now. And sure enough, that break came, and here I am sitting in front of you, talking to you, and playing on stage. And on Thursday, we're playing the Greek Theatre. I mean, a very, very, very special gig. and playing on the stage where some of the biggest names have ever played. I mean, how honourable is that? How wonderful is that?
Well, I think it's well-deserved.
Well, thank you for saying so.
Well, Hugh Grundy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Very kind of you to say so, and thank you for taking the time out to interview me. Thank you.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.